use the howdy thing. Is that approved?
Yes.
Okay. All you howdy people need to be able to tell me that's approved. I get nervous. Welcome. It's a good Saturday morning. You are in the Disaster and Emergency Preparedness meeting for GTAC. If this isn't your flight, you may need to go back out to the gateway, find another flight. My name's Eric Epley, and I'm going to be your host. We're going to go through our agenda real quickly, starting with our roster attendance. Mike Weimer. Here. Tim Berry. Here. Brad Gowdy. Here. Wanda Helgeson. Here. Dr. Kidd. Here. Chief Kidd. Here. Robbie Kirk. Sari McCoy. Shalon Montgomery. Here. Dr. Morber. Here. Sharon Knowles is excused. She called me previously. Randy Pettis. Here. Ricky Reeves. Here. Nick Sloan. Nick's. Okay. Edwin Smith. Here. Kenneth Webb. Here. Michael Wilson. Here. Excellent. Well, we have a quorum, guys. And we'll start off first with GTAC appointments. We have made the decisions on the next year's committee. The third, as you guys know, if you've been involved for a while, we rotate the committee. A third of the committee rolls off or reapplies every year. And this year we have new folks that are coming on that I don't have their names handy, but I do want to congratulate the people who are going to be rolling off. First, Nick Sloan is going to be rotating off. Brad Gowdy is going to be rotating off, and Dr. Morber is going to be rotating off after maybe 7 or 8 years of service with this as well. Brad, both you guys have been here for a long, long time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your efforts. And so I have a letter of appreciation from the chair. This is Brad's, and I have Dr. Morber's. There's yours, Doc. Cheers. Thank you so much for your service. Brad, thank you so much for your service. Reapply quickly. It's a quick process. There's only so much DNA in the state that understands emergency medical, ESF aid stuff, and disaster preparedness. We want to keep you guys involved. And frankly, for those in the audience, party foul. No. Hello. No. For those in the audience, if you've been to these meetings before, I'm not really the most official with respect to this. I feel like the entire group should be participating. If you're old enough or mature enough in this process to remember the disaster task force before we became a committee, it was just 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 of us sitting in a big room in a circle making decisions and coming together through consensus. And I still feel that way, although once we became more official and became an actual committee, they made us sit up here and have a microphone and do all the other stuff. So if you have a question in the audience during the day, if you're new, raise your hand and say, hey, what the heck, I don't understand that. This should be very, very informal and flexible. So we'll go straight to the work group reports. Hey, Sari. We're going to let the record reflect, and I'll adjust that Sari's now here so that she counts for the attendance. Yay.
My apologies, I had to run in with the 19-month-old.
Well, if anybody made it through the red shirts, I mean, that's a miracle, right? I am glad we are teaching these kids respect, but there's certain elevator protocol and etiquette. I don't know if they're waiting for an empty elevator. I don't know what they're waiting for, so I kind of helped them. There was some real life learning today on the 18th floor. Life lessons. Hashtag life lessons.
Maybe they didn't want to be in the elevator with you.
Yeah, that's it. The people who we became close friends because I was late definitely didn't want to be in the elevator with me. So we'll go straight to discussion and possible action on the following items. We're going to go through the work group reports, the EMTF report. I want to spend a fair amount of time on the IDRU, which is B. So I guess it says E, but that's not right. We'll call it BE for here. And we have some discussion I want to have about Paris and about our processes here in the States about what we're doing. We've had a lot of discussion back in our home area with our EOC and emergency management and public safety colleagues. So we'll talk some about that in a big way. Starting off with TDMS. Dr. Kidd just walked out, but where's Joe Palfini? Get one each. Let's go. Hop up to the microphone here. Let's do a little, you want to talk about teamwork? It's going to be tough without her. Why don't you do EMTF and IDRU? That'd be good.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, so EMTF has been busy as of the last 24 hours, kind of get ready for this weekend. So first of all, there is a pretty sizable contingent of personnel and equipment downstairs in the exhibit hall, which I would hope that people can stop by and visit with some of the team members, trying to show some of the newer capability we're developing to include the IDRU, which we're going to talk about here in a moment. The first thing on the agenda is the EMTF Memorandum of Agreement, which is on the screen. This is the product of several months of work to refine our kind of version 1 MOA, which has been serving us well for the last few years. We as in the Executive Governance Committee and many of the work groups took this on to try to streamline the process. We had some agencies that were hesitant to sign because of some of the language in the document, which, if you'll remember, we developed, and it took us a while, but we kind of needed to get off the ground. So we were willing to accept some issues to be able to deploy some personnel. So this is kind of a refinement of that. The lawyers really appreciated the fact that we went from 19 pages to 4 pages, and I think most of the agency representatives appreciated that as well. Most of the verbiage that was removed had to do with more operational issues that we didn't feel needed to be in the contract between an agency and a lead rank. So we've vetted this amongst several agencies, and this is, it says draft on it right now, and as of immediately after this meeting, the draft is coming off. It's going to be final, and we're going to start circulating that. We already have 3 or 4 agencies that are eager to sign the new version of this. So very happy, good work on the part of all of our partners and our Executive Governance Committee to get that done. I'm really pleased with the way this looks, and I think it's going to serve us well into the future. It accomplishes the same mission, but it does so for the pre-hospital providers, the hospital providers, and the physician groups and so forth. So it's really one all-encompassing document. So very happy with that.
Well, is this one going to replace the current one?
So we need to,
For that question.
that's the next step, right? We need to talk a little bit, and I'll be curious to see what the group thinks. So everybody understand where we're at? So the EMTF MOA that's in place right now basically could serve for another, I don't even know if there's a term on those. I think we put kind of a green thing.
So the group had discussed, and I'd be interested in any feedback, that we would have 2 years to move from one to the other. I think that's plenty of time for agencies to review the document.
What are thoughts from the committee and thoughts from the audience? Is 2 years too long, too much, draws it out quick enough, too fast?
No, I think it's going to have to, because it has to go through legal and a lot of the agencies, and I think that slows down some of the bigger agencies, especially.
Yeah, because I cringe at the thought of having to send another one through.
Well, to give you the backstory to this, some institutions signed it basically under the promise that we were going to redo it, right? That we were trying to get it started, and some of the major healthcare systems had real frustrations, and we said, look, this is a statewide document, we can't change it, and I said, but I promise we will gather your thoughts within the next year or two. Let us get up and running and get this started. So this is really our faith and commitment to the people who, if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you ought to do it. And so we're changing it really. I think the other one was fine, frankly, but we told a bunch of people we were going to revisit it. So it It's better, don't get me wrong. I just meant,
I guess
yeah, there are
that'd
plenty
be-
of other things I would rather be working on. If this thing actually works, is it killing us? But we owed it to the people who signed it under the agreement that we were going to revisit it. We did it. I think it's improved.
So any major changes? I mean, that would be the question. I think
There's really no substantive changes.
There's no
There's no
right.
substantive changes to the contractual part of the document. Like I said, it really talked a lot more about once activated, resources will be available within 4 hours, and they would meet at a certain rally point, and that's more operational discussion. What we wanted is the CEOs of the hospitals and the city managers and those sorts of folks that are signing this document to be able to see, I'm going to send some people, they're going to figure out where they're going and how they're going to do it, but I'm going to be responsible for their liability and their this, that, and the other thing. I'm going to be reimbursed for some other things, and I'm happy with the contractual relationship, and how they get that done is really not something they wanted to get in the middle.
I can see the question coming up in some areas if it's not that big of a change to grandfather the current ones and just let them keep going, because it never terminates.
I think this would be the answer I would give you, which I would say that's fine. My lawyers, our legal folks and contract folks their heads are spinning for us to say we're going to leave two different documents in place forever. Not happy. Who thinks that would be acceptable though? Because really, it's probably on the RACs to have to worry about, not the individual agencies. I mean, to be fair, I mean, maybe it's my problem to deal with. Who thinks it makes more sense to just push everybody through over a reasonable period of time for 2 years, or leave some people in the old document basically grandfathered in and leave it forever? Option one, raise your hand. Aye, raise, vote. Okay, option two, raise your hand. I feel better. Phillips is feeling better, but she didn't carry on. All right, so I think we need to move forward. Is 2 hours, 2 years enough time?
2 hours.
2 hours, a little too short. I got it. It's Saturday morning.
The meeting's not going to be over for an hour and a
We should
half.
be having
So
breakfast
is there a
tacos
term-
and.
Is there a term on this one?
There is, I believe we put, it was self-renews until terminating, that sort of thing.
We put evergreen language in the new one.
We did put evergreen language in there.
Okay. All right, Dud?
I guess they're recording these.
They are.
I like the renewing language as well. There is a proposed rule change in the EMS rules that are being discussed around the state that all EMS providers of all types are going to have to designate every 2 years at their relicensing if they are going to participate with the EMTF or not. So I think that will help.
You mean regardless if it has nothing to do with the EMTF, that's still going to be a requirement?
Yep, they have to tell DSHS, are they going to participate with the EMTF or are they not? So, and all that means is, if they say yes, we've got to figure out how to get that information out of DSHS so the EMTF lead racks can go meet with them and get them to sign this. But that's a thing the EMS committee wanted in there. The reason it's in there is because that suggestion came from pre-EMTF when we were struggling to get EMS agencies to sign up. So we said, well, let's make it a part of their requirements that they have to say yay or nay every 2 years.
We're not making them do it. We're just saying, say yes, say no.
Yes, they have to attest to
burn the
DSHS,
Constitution.
are you going to be involved with the EMTF, yes or no?
Okay.
So they still can opt out, but if it's yes, hopefully that may help some folks, get some more folks recruited.
Kevin, so he did the, so that's a proposed rule change.
Yes.
So we haven't really worked the logistics and ministerial function of that, right? That's why we can at least ask the question in the packet, no different than we can ask anything else.
Absolutely, there's a handful of things that they have to attest to already, so this is just going to be one more.
Okay. Who thinks that's it? Chief?
Dudley, I haven't read the rule, but is it going to prevent them from getting in within the next 2 years, or will they have to relicense if they choose to participate sometime during that period?
No, it's just every 2 years they have to basically say, yes, we're participating with the EMTF, or we plan to, or no, we don't.
And no future auditor will ever come back and say, well, you guys in your license 2 years ago said you weren't participating,
No,
so
they
I'm
can-
not gonna reimburse you for any expenses.
The point behind that is that they can sign up at any time, but we want to get it, we want to kind of track that. So how many EMS agencies say they are participating versus, I mean, it'd be a great QA tool if nothing else. How many say they're participating versus how many do you have on MOAs? And where's that delta? And then that could give the EMTF guys something to go work on in the region.
Thank you.
Or they can be in violation of their license if they opt out of the EMTF.
Yeah. So it's noble. It's so that, you know, the way to some place is paved with good intentions. So that just make sure that if they opt in on their license packet, then they opt out later on and terminate the EMTF contract. There's no, I don't want to make this negative for someone who doesn't want to participate. Frankly, they don't want to participate. I don't know that we want them anyway on the EMTF process, right? So.
And the EMS committee didn't intend for that in that suggestion, and I don't think the wording is that way. It's just they have to say yes or no to participate.
Got it.
That's all it is.
Sweet.
Based on language and the
Any other, we got a lot, it's 73 minutes. You guys want, anybody have any other questions on the EMTF MOA, the new one?
Not the MOA, but for Dudley's question, so that's, when does that take effect? Is that for people that license in the future, or is that still kind of out in the gray area?
So it's still in a proposed rule.
Draft.
It has not been through legal yet at DSHS, so sometime in the
2020?
future, it will become maybe or maybe not part of the rule.
So it's a data rule, it's not a prerequisite.
It's not a prerequisite.
Any other concerns or thoughts, questions about that? Okay, next step with that, what happens now? I probably should.
For the MOA.
Yeah.
So
We've talked about it at disaster.
we're pulling the draft off of it. We're gonna send copies to all of our lead racks as of the official new MOA, and we're gonna post it on. It will start being posted for people to sign. We have people that want to get into it, so we're gonna start rolling that out. The EMTF coordinators will start speaking with their agency representatives to talk about how they want to transition and what that process looks like.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, process-wise, because I see a bunch of my folks in the room, are we approving it? EMTF exec moved it from draft to final, and you are presenting it here as part of the stakeholder process?
Yes.
Or were we presenting a draft here and then going to do that in our exec meeting tomorrow, whenever that is, this weekend? Actually, I don't know.
We've actually already, at the executive governance
It's already live.
committee has
Okay, we're just talking about it.
approved it.
Hey, glad you guys didn't have any changes. So it's final. Just so it's clear, the power lies with EMTF execs, right? I'm just trying to make sure that's clear. The final approval from draft to final is not with this body. It's with, is that what you're standing up about, Rick? Okay. All right, tomorrow then. I think,
It was pending.
by the way, the reason that's coming up is we're meeting almost weekly on phone calls and stuff about the IDRU stuff. You think, well, shouldn't they know? It's like we've had more conference calls in the last 12 weeks than you could ever imagine. So having this one topic kind of float through and not be exactly clear where we're at, I'm not really surprised.
We were pending a legal review. It was.
Oh, yeah.
It was approved pending legal review, which came back fine.
Got
so
it. We may
I'm
not have
assuming
closed the
it's
loop that our lawyer
fine,
said
but-
was fine. That's what it is. I got it. Yep. You guys approved it pending that legal review. The legal review did come back. I bet you we haven't told it. Now we're here. Tomorrow we'll vote that Domus Omus done for sure.
Yes.
All right.
Domus Omus.
Charge forward. First and 10. IDRU.
Okay. The IDU project is moving forward at a decent pace. We've started the really
Infectious
preliminary-
Disease Response Unit of EMTF. Sorry, doing the acronym clearance.
We're still waiting on the funding to be finalized from DSHS, but I expect that within the next couple weeks. We've scheduled a preliminary, or we've tentatively scheduled the 28th of January to be our first stakeholder meeting. We haven't finalized the location. Again, that's going to be a topic for the executive committee meeting tomorrow for EMTF to finalize that, pending obviously our approval for the contract. And the focus of that meeting is going to be to bring together some of the stakeholders from the specific regions and start really hacking out the details of equipment and supplies and capability and where that capability comes from and where the personnel are pulled from and how we conduct training and all those things that people are asking frequently for answers that we've been dodging because we didn't want to provide answers to questions that need to be raised in a committee of experts and not in a small group of others. So I apologize ahead of time if you ask any questions of either myself or anybody else down at the booth downstairs about how this IDRU thing is going to work. They're going to be evasive, and if they're not evasive, I really want to know that because we haven't made a lot of decisions yet.
Hey, Eric,
Little performance improvement, go ask specific questions.
Yeah.
They should not answer.
for the benefit of the audience, could we elaborate a little bit about what the IDR concept is?
Yeah, so, well, as I think most great ideas ever start, this whole thing started over dinner somewhere and the idea that we would leverage the Emergency Medical Task Force structure in Texas to be able to put a tiered system of response to a high consequence infectious disease with the recognition that frontline hospitals and EMS agencies may not have all of the high level PPE and expertise that would be required for an Ebola or similar response, right? That was really, how do you make sure everybody in Texas, if they end up screening and identifying somebody and isolating a patient that does have a high consequence infectious disease, how do you help them? And how do you help them quickly? And then how do you help the guys that helped them? So this IDRU concept, the Infectious Disease Response Unit, is really another component of EMTF. So you have ambulances, you have ambuses, you have the MMU, the Mobile Medical Unit Field Hospital, you have the RN strike teams, you have MIST, the Medical Incident Support Teams, you have the ambulance staging managers, now you have IDRU, the Infectious Disease Response Unit. When I say it's there, it's not there, but it's there conceptually. There's a placeholder in the structure now. And Assistant Commissioner Gruber and others in DSHS, along with the legislature, pursued and approved exceptional item funding, along with the CDC Ebola funding and HPP and PHEP funding. And so there's a significant amount of money, $4.7 million over 3 years. It's real money, and it's going to have to be spent smartly, wisely, and quickly. And sometimes that's the toughest thing. You can spend money quickly, but you want to make sure it's spent wisely. IDRU should be seen by everybody in this state. If you're a public safety response official, if you're a hospital person who's been working on this, it should be a synergistic effect to whatever you've been building locally. Let me say that again. The IDRU concept should be working with and in conjunction with your local plans that you've been putting together for the last 2 years since we had this problem with Ebola, okay? If you have identified agencies in your town or region that are going to transport Ebola patients and they've worked on Visqueen and other capabilities, IDRU can help that. It should help that. That's what we want it to do. We're not trying to start something separate and independent of your regional processes. It's actually the reverse. It actually would be, this is finally some extra support with equipment, and hopefully those people will participate in developing your regional IDRU concepts. Fair point, Joe?
Fair point. We had a discussion with this commissioner last week, and to kind of illustrate the point, one of he had two significant concerns, and one was the fact that there's significant regional capability in some areas. I mean, it's obviously, there's a spectrum. So it truly is how the state overlays, provides support to any and all regions that request it. It is a state asset, but it leverages the regional capability that we've already built. I think the best question he asked the whole day, we spent an hour talking about IDRU, and the best question he asked is, how do we get from here to there? And what I thought was the best answer for EMTF was, it's actually pretty easy. we've built the highway already. This is really another truck on the highway, right? We've got the MOUs in place. We have the relationships. We know how to move people, activate people, move stuff, and all that kind of thing. It's just a different group of stuff. So we need to bring the people together that are smart on this specific threat and develop more of the details. But the way that we're going to get there has actually already been charted and improved. So
leveraging the MOAs, the relationships, the structure of EMTF, really what we're talking about is the substantive parts of infectious disease, and not necessarily how do we put a team together and all that stuff, because we already have that. I think that was genius.
And and it's really about the consensus piece as well. I think there's pockets of excellence across the state and in different pieces of this. And really, I think the benefit for the entire state is going to be that if we bring all those folks together and we can talk about some of these best practices and maybe things that people aren't doing in their region because they just haven't been exposed to that. And I think the rising tides float all boats, right? So as we improve as a state, the individual regions improve, and the regions are where the capability lie.
Right.
And the state is leveraging our relationships with the regions to actually do the work on behalf of the state.
So we should be leveraging. As you hear this conversation, if you've been involved in a local or a regional plan for Ebola response, you're who we're looking for, right? So I know the Dallas, Fort Worth area, the Metroplex has done a great deal of work on this effort because they were ground zero with a lot of this. We're going to be, I hope, relying on the people who really were in the trenches with that to help. I think there are experts in Houston that we've had conversations with. I think there are infectious disease physicians who responded to the Ebola crisis in West Africa, right? We're going to be looking for, we have 27 million people in Texas. I'll bet you we've got some of the brightest minds in this stuff, in this genre in the country. And we want to leverage that and bring that to bear through a consensus model. The practical aspects of this, really, not what's in the caches, but the cache model itself is 8 EMS caches and 8 hospital caches in every EMTF region, rapidly responding if needed. If a hospital identifies a patient in a smaller town, that cache could be pushed forward rapidly. Now, rapidly is one of those loose things. Is that 10 minutes? Or is that 6 hours, or is that 12 hours? Those are all questions that need to be worked out with the group, not decided in here. But after that, there will be 4 additional 72-hour caches that will follow from San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, El Paso. Those 72-hour caches will be in trail behind that first push of the EMS and or hospital cache that's in that region. And finally, there will be a 10-day cache that's coming behind the 72-hour cache if it's requested. All of this stuff is as requested through our normal processes, right? It's not getting shoved down your throat. And the value of that is if we get the patient transported to UTMB or flown to Nebraska or wherever, then the 10-day cache can resupply the local and the 72-hour cache and drive home, hopefully not empty, but empty, and then those other assets are fully stocked and ready to go for another response. And if you wonder why we pick 10 days, because when Joe's been speaking with the big vendors, that seems to be they're in, well, we could get you a bunch of stuff within 7 to 10 days. So that's a nice number, which means we at least can survive, we hope, as best we can with what we've put in place on the ground as opposed to what we're waiting on to arrive by FedEx or whatever. Does that make sense? I think it's really good stuff. Any questions on that from the audience? It's important because this is November 21st. When the contract hits, which we expect in the next probably 2 weeks, when it goes live, there's going to be fur flying. We're going to need to be working fast. You will need to pay attention to emails and to invites. It will not be the typical GTAC, well, we told you 6 times and hope you might show up, and we'll have 3 more meetings after that to make sure everybody, I mean, this is highly visible, and we will be moving fast. Work with your EMTF coordinator and your lead rack exec director. If you want to be a part of this process, or you have people in your agency that want to be a part of this process, I would be reaching out to them today. I would say, hey, when this thing gets rolling, we're in. Let me know where we need to put me in, Coach. We're ready. Clear? Everybody got it? Ooh.
Have you identified some ways, or have you looked at any options to work with somebody either in the state or in the nation to try to rotate out expirable pieces
Those are good.
to reduce cost?
That's what we want the, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's part of the discussion. Actually, it goes to, we don't even know what the cash is yet, but
Yes.
vendor managed stock and that sort of thing.
And early in the project, there's a person who's going to be responsible for helping pull all that together. And that's a really good point for us to make sure we have in that person's job description, is that they have to create a plan for,
Continual
burns of that
resupply and-
stuff. But we're going to have a person to do all that legwork.
It'll come with an IDRU coordinator.
Yes.
Yeah. How much money year one off the top of your head?
1.9 year one, 1.1 year two, and then whatever the remainder is on a
Yeah.
bright sunny day when I could do the math.
Okay.
Goes into year three.
When you haven't been moving an 18-wheeler since
It's fine.
6.
There was at least
Okay.
a foot between the 18-wheeler and the concrete wall.
Got it. Yep. Hey, Daryl.
Drill home the fact that this is real, and I think you're in an early stage of this concept, and that's why not everyone knows about it yet. But as soon as everyone does know about it, which should be in the next week or maybe this afternoon, the spread of tropical diseases is a big topic nationwide amongst folks that pay attention to that. And in Modern Healthcare magazine recently, the magazine Hospital Administrators there's an article, Breeding in America, Neglected Tropical Diseases Taking Hold in the U.S. Now, to bring this closer to home, it's in the warmer climates. And Texas is one of about 4 states where they say something needs to be done, and they're saying that the states are not prepared for an abundance of these diseases to break out, and it could be really devastating. Dr. Hotez from the Baylor College of Medicine is one of the leading experts in the world on this topic, and we have a meeting with him in 2 weeks to talk about what should be in the cache, what kind of training should take place, how many people are needed, what are we getting into? Meanwhile, the money is there for us to do this, and so way to go, EMTF. I think it's great that you're leading it. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl, and thank you. Those are the kinds of linkages. Daryl called and said, I think this guy's world famous. He seems to be a world-renowned expert on tropical disease. This seems like the kind of guy we should have involved. And Joe and I said absolutely, and we've set up a meeting. We're heading over there in a week or two. That's what we're looking for, guys. This is the time to raise your hand and say, hey, we've got a guy who was in the military and he's was at USAMRIID and he's an expert and he's been everywhere. We want him involved. He's at our Access, our middle hospital, right? He's at the place where they're probably going to bring from the front line. We like those hospitals to be really, really involved. Really involved. EMS agencies who've been putting together these teams to go respond. I know Dallas has a really great, I've heard about the plan. Rick's talked to me a bunch about it. I know Houston had some plans. We put some things together. I'm sure every region has something, but we want to hear from you. So Joe definitely wants to hear from you. Okay, good. You talked about the conference stuff and the MOA. Good. Dr. Kidd, we want to talk about Cmte, and we want to leave some time. So we have 55 minutes. We want to talk also about the Hartford consensus. I'm trying to figure out where we're going to. It's actually part of EMTF, so we'll come back to circle back on that about questions I want to ask about EMTF response, Joe, to mass casualty and active shooter type terrorist exercises. It's not exactly on your agenda, but it's part of the EMTF. I just had a question and wanted to ask about it, so we're going to talk a little bit about that in a second. Go ahead, Dr. Kidd. Cmte.
You just want me to talk about the Cmte piece? So we've been having discussions with, is everybody familiar with Cmte in here and what that is? Texas Mass Fatality Operational Response Team. It's a concept that we've been talking about for about 2 years or longer now, probably 2.5 years. Have had a lot of help from our partners in Houston and with BCFS and with DSHS in planning a statewide response team. Should we have the unthinkable happen and have a large mass fatality that an area can't handle on their own. And the idea is similar to how we did ambulance MOAs in the early days, is getting people who have expertise in the different areas of mass fatality response and mortuary response around the state to be basically on call or willing to go and assist should we have a large event and the state gets involved. We've been talking about how to set this up, and we've had some discussions about trying to find a university home for it, for training and to manage the response piece, personnel piece, and have not really had a whole lot of success in that. And so we've started the discussions about should this be another truck on the EMTF highway, to use Joe's analogy. Should mass fatality response team be another piece of EMTF? And so I guess we want to talk about that idea, that possibility here.
Thoughts from the group? Does everybody understand what we're asking? Would you build, does everybody understand? So we have Timor, we need a response team that would do the mass fatality, we have the DPMU, we have the other team members that are across the state. Would you build a new and separate process, or would you leverage the existing MOA infrastructure? Basically, I think that's the easier way to say it.
Did they get funding through the state?
They're not funding yet. This is about their stuff, right? So CETRAC purchased the DPMU with HPP funds 3 or 4 years ago, and it responded to West. We didn't pull it out because the numbers weren't at the same level, but it responded. So the question is, do you build a completely new infrastructure for the Timor process to have teams? Because they've informally met with the medical examiners around the state. They're building consensus, and if they were deployed, they would be funded, right? They would be, well, how would you do that? How would you pay them back? Well, we know how to pay MTF people, we know how to pay ambulances, we know how to pay ambus guys and MMU guys. So how do I tell the San Antonio Medical Examiner's Office, if you send this guy on that job, where's the document?
I mean, we have everything in play already.
Not reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Use your existing.
It's just another tab.
Yeah.
I agree.
We've had ambulances in Texas for years, but until we got the EMTF up and organizing them, then we put them in an organized manner to be used, and same number of ambulances.
Yeah.
So it's possible.
So same thing with this.
Reimburse them under the
Yes.
state funds.
Yeah, and that's what we've been discussing is there's got to be some sort of mechanism where the medical examiners know if they send their people, they're going to get reimbursed.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't we use the same process we've been using for years now that works great, that's been vetted and DSHS, is comfortable with it? Why would we not use the same process?
So if we look at this like we have an MMU deployed, and we have the first team out there, and it's X number of days, and we're going to change teams. So the stuff is going to stay, and if the team started from San Antonio, but now we're going to send a team from El Paso, they have MOUs with me, and we probably need to really look at the agreements between the EMTF regions. But they would deploy from me, and the money comes back through me to them. So I would wonder if we don't do the same thing, where basically they're deployed through CETRAC because that's where the stuff is, but the individual team members may come from different regions and have agreements with that individual region. So I think that's doable, but we just need to make that slick.
So this is, I think CETRAC has taken the lead on mass fatality from the beginning. They invested heavily. I don't know another region that has spent on one item alone, the DPMU was $400,000. Does that sound right? It's real. I mean, they understand this intimately. They're connected with the Harris County Medical Examiner's Office, this forensic team with Allison and Jason. I strongly recommend that they are the lead entity on that tab. Does everybody understand? So we have MIST, we have MMU, we have AMBUS, and we see people in those tabs really run those things. At the end of the day, it's still an EMTF asset. The state coordination office will get a tasker from DS, like we'll have something blow up, a plane crash. Some district coordinator is going to call and say we need the team org. That's going to go through the normal process. Daryl and his guys, Lori, Mark, et cetera, Chris, they're all going to be, I mean, we all know within seconds when these things happen, right? So wheels are spinning informally. But that process, no different than sending an ambulance strike team, sending an AMBUS, sending MIST teams, sending any of that, that flow should happen exactly the same way, but they would be the subject matter experts in sort of operationally deploying and running that stuff. That's the way I see it.
I think it would be great because, I mean, there several of the pieces, several of the groups, the parts to EMTF are very specific. And we have subject matter experts that operate those, and you don't cross-pollinate, you know?
Yep.
So I don't see why it wouldn't fit into there, and that is an important piece to a big incident is the teamwork. And I don't know if everybody realizes it or not, but a lot of times those guys are first in. They go in and pick up a lot of pieces, like some big hurricanes, they'll go in and pick up a lot of pieces before we even respond in.
So the value of that is simultaneously we have groups of people who will be unique to that. Allison would be one of those people, I would think, right? If you don't know, if you don't know her, she's genuinely a subject matter expert about this stuff. And so they're going to have meetings and committees and work, and it's like the AMBUS. You know, the look at the stuff the AMBUS guys have done. They've consistently built a really, really incredible product for the state of Texas.
Is there a
well, yes, there is a forensics. That's my point. Is it's another world. So what we're trying to do is help that world be successful with logistics and with the mechanics of getting reimbursed. Really, that's at the end of the day what this is. And so it folds in nicely. Now, what I was going to say as a follow-on is there is value, though, in the EMTF. You are going to have truck drivers or mover. There's some things that are not unique to I mean, a tent is a tent at the end of the day, right? Before you start it doesn't matter what you put inside of it, having tent putter upper guys who are really smart tent putter upper guys would be helpful to share instead of one group of people putting down an MMU and going, how you guys doing? Can't help you over there. You know, it's like, we need to be a team of teams, I guess, and sharing with 18-wheeler drivers, with other, where those capabilities can overlap, always falling underneath the command and control elements of each specific tab,
Plus,
right?
moving these individuals is no different than moving RN strike teams.
Correct.
I mean,
I've
got people, you need them, I will get them to you.
Yes. Yes, and frankly, the medical examiners aren't going to know how to rent trucks and put them on the road and do that kind of stuff quickly. So we can take care of that wraparound stuff and let the subject matter experts be subject matter experts in their field. We have 45 minutes now. Any other thoughts on that or concerns? What's the dissenting view? Anybody have any concerns about this and maybe build a different infrastructure for another reason? I mean, it makes sense to me, but I want to make sure.
Dr. Kidd's been meeting, but I guess the flip side of that, the DMORT discipline, are they aware of EMTF and the things that we do so that they can see how that would merge together to work?
Locally or DMORT or TMORT?
TMORT.
Okay.
Specifically the medical examiners?
Right.
Yes, they're somewhat familiar with it. A year and a half ago, actually, they had a meeting of all 13 of the medical examiners, actually came and met together about this for an entire day in Houston. And Nim and I both went and talked to them to give them kind of an overview of how emergency management works and then the EMTF. And so they have some kind of large view of what it is. And they were all of them were very supportive of the idea. It's just now we just got to figure out a way to make it happen logistically.
So unless there's another, I want to make sure we are kind to the time. Unless there's another dissenting view or other thought or question, I would say that the GTAC committee, the disaster committee, recommends to the Department of State Health Services and the EMTF exec committee that we think it makes sense to have Timor be another component of EMTF like we've seen the other successful components. Okay? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That's unanimous. That moves forward. Does that need to go? I guess it needs to go to GTAC. Michelle, I'll need to we'll put that into the process. We know some people at the MTF exec, though, right? We can start. Okay. All right. Joe, can you come back to the microphone so I can get this into the agenda issue with Paris? So I appreciate you talking about the things that were on the MOA, the IDRU, and the EMS conference activities. But I have a question about the MOA and then how we would respond. I think I've gotten it in there now. So
All these various responses.
all these various responses. For instance, how would that work in Texas if we had a Paris-like attack in one of our towns?
How would it work?
Yeah.
Well, so obviously I'm not going to be very careful to tiptoe around the local response. Obviously there's a response in the city and the surrounding
Anywhere
county.
Texas won't wish any bad will on anyone.
And then, of course, those local the authority having jurisdiction in that local area would contact the state for additional assistance. A lot of there's kind of two simultaneous. I'll go back to the same analogy I was using before. So there's lanes on the highway, right? So there's kind of a regional response process. So within that region, there's probably already regional mutual aid that's moving some resources in that general direction already. So we're here, so we'll use this region for example. The AM buses are likely already on people's kind of mass casualty card, if you will. And so those are probably already in play. The calls are probably already going up to.
Who agrees with that? Who agrees that ambuses and other EMTF assets regionally, if there was a bomb that went off or there was a attack, would be in play and possibly deployed regionally? Okay, good. Just
Better
making
question
sure.
is who doesn't believe that's the case.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. Who thinks they wouldn't be in play? Okay, not saying they are in play, saying they easily could be in play, and they've been written basically into your plans as an option.
And I could
Hold
pretty
on.
much say that's
Go
been
ahead.
the answer because we've seen
I
it.
think if you're talking regionally, I think those assets would all be in play, but I am not sure they would be in play as EMTF. They would be in play as my neighbor and my neighbor's neighbor, and we've had a really bad thing happen. So I don't know that it would be formally have spun up as EMTF.
I agree 100% with that assessment.
Everybody would be there, but I don't know that they would be in pretty ambulance strike teams and.
Well, we still have to go through the proper process of making sure the local resources are exhausted and then stepping up the ladder before we can get to the state level. But I do see something like that happening where the SEO is beginning to call around and beginning to put in play resources availability, short notice, so that if those resources are exhausted.
Right. So I think, to your point, I mean, we still haven't left the local response. I mean, right, so the locals are still doing their thing, and they're still going to potentially request additional. Most big disasters, people basically say, send me some resources until I tell you, whoa, right? So just because it's a box to check before we go back to our working on the problem, and that's a good response. So there are local resources. I agree that those ambuses and ambulances are 100% local resources. They are not EMTF resources. There's no state admission request at this time. All that.
We need to be. We're going to talk a bunch about this. This is
well,
good. I'm glad we're here because we're going to talk about it.
So when I say that,
It's got EMTF across the top of the bus. We're going to be a little tough to say, well, that's not an EMTF asset. I mean, it's an EMTF asset. It's just not state activated.
it is not
yet.
an EMTF response. at this point.
Right. We need to get out of the habit of thinking EMTF is state only. We need to get out of that habit. You're not going to get paid by the state on a regional EMTF deployment. And you're not going to get paid by the state for a local job that Dudley goes to Universal City to do rehab in local mutual aid. But Dudley going to Hondo for a bus wreck, I'm going to tell you, they're going to think that's a regional EMTF deployment. He knows he's not going to get paid. You're going to get paid for a regional EMTF deployment, Dud?
No,
Okay. Is it a regional EMTF deployment?
we're not going to get paid by reimbursed.
You might get paid by the patient or whatever, right? Sure.
Right. I just don't think those are. If it's-
Universal.
If it's a state mission, then there are pieces of paper. And
Yes,
you know who's
fully
where,
agree.
and-
So
If
here's
you
why
ask
this
how
is
it pertains to the
squishy.
MOA.
We have worked for the last 5 years on EMTF on building capability, on building assets, on building infrastructure, on building training and education, and on building the reimbursement process on the biggest jobs there are with the state reimbursement. Anybody disagree on that? We have not focused as much on the regional squishy part of regional EMTF deployment, in some ways because there were already regional mutual aid processes. Houston has AMOPS. I think that's what the name of it is, right? The AMOPS plan, right? Someone wrote that up 5 years ago, and they spent a bunch of the regional catastrophic preparedness money on that. I'm pretty familiar. I think that is the precursor to, that was what one region that had a bunch of money did, which should have been, if we'd had EMTF in place for years and years and years, it would have been the regional EMTF deployment model. Frankly, I'd like to steal, I'd like to borrow it. Sure, no, that's my point. It's like we need to decide if the squishy, uncomfortable part of what does regional EMTF mean? We're not getting paid, but it ought to be organized so that that incident commander who's calling for stuff, it's coming in some kind of structure that everybody's familiar with. That's all. I shouldn't expect that until it's catastrophically busy enough for the state that basically I got to know all the AMBUS individual dispatch numbers. I got to know everybody's. That's crazy. I don't get it. Go ahead, Dud. Sorry, you're up here.
No, that's all right. I was just going to mention, and I like the term squishy because I think that's where we are.
Yes.
And I think what Wanda's talking about is exactly right. The EMTFs are the AMBUSs are an easy piece to talk about because a lot of folks are using them in the region, in their local mutual aid plans. So the majority of responses where we've touched patients outside of our own jurisdiction with our bus has been on local mutual aid, not even a regional response. We got the call directly from Seguin Fire Department or directly from Converse Fire Department, not through our regional process to request assets. And so I think it's there. So the agencies around, I think what'd be interesting to talk to the AMBUS guys about is are they and do they respond to their normal mutual aid areas with their bus without that request coming through the regional request?
Correct.
for
And I'm
the
fine.
bus,
Hold on. I want to make sure I'm clear. Did you say the vast majority of your AMBUS responses have
where
been?
we've actually touched patients.
Okay.
So, because we have gone, in our region specifically, because of the way we've designed that response, we've gone out of the house a lot, but we've never gotten there and actually touched patients, because it either wasn't as bad as we thought it was when somebody got there.
Okay. So if you took total number of the ones where you actually picked up a patient.
We
did
actually
something.
moved patients,
I got-
touched them and
that
all
makes more
that.
sense. I'm like-
Has been a local mutual aid role, not really even a regional role.
Right. So when you've
And
got
so
local
that's where
mutual.
it gets kind of squishy and I think the AMBUS is a key piece to talk about, because I think that if the EMTFs have talked about this and people are looking at that AMBUS as a local mutual aid before it's even a regional mutual aid, before it's a state resource, then I think it'll be used. If not, I'm not sure if it'll be used until it becomes a regional or a state problem. And I'm not sure in that case if we're really utilizing them appropriately. But I think that discussion needs to be had.
Let me ask you a question. How many local mutual aid requests have you had from anyone in Hondo, Uvalde, or Del Rio? And if anybody knows our area, I just described the town on the other side of San Antonio from him that's 30, 90, and 150 miles away. How many local mutual aid to the Schertz EMS dispatch? Hey, this is Valverde EMS, Dud, Schertz dispatch, we're going to need an AMBUS out here.
None.
None.
We've had
How many
two
from
or three.
Converse? How many
had
from Converse?
2 in Converse
Okay,
and
Live
three
Oak.
three in
Right.
Seguin.
Right, Seguin. Okay, so here's my point. I don't think it has to do with EMTF assets in the bus. I think it has to do with concentric circles. So Dudley can provide local mutual aid with an ambulance. He happens to have an AMBUS. So it goes on a local mutual aid job because it's local mutual aid because he is my neighbor.
Yes.
Right, so I'm completely fine with that. I think we ought to have that written into the plan, that any AMBUS owner should go on local mutual aid to a neighboring jurisdiction on local mutual aid. I think that is, I'll tell you, although it's local mutual aid the way the request, I think the regional EMTF process should know about it and should be, that's why we put the dispatch things, if you're dispatched anywhere, right? That now goes all the way to the SOC.
Yeah.
How many people knew that? Every time the AMBUS drives out the door, the SOC knows, the regional EMTF process, the EMTF coordinators know about it. I think that's great. That's all I'm talking about.
But the point I was trying to make was back to Wanda's comments, especially with the AMBUS, is that I think there, the AMBUS is going to get used. If we have an active shooter in Seguin or Converse, I'm fairly certain the AMBUS is going to be requested. And chances are both of them will be requested, viewed as a mutual aid thing.
Who you think Seguin would call San Antonio Fire directly? To
That
get
would
the
probably
other
be
bus?
a MedCom thing at that point. It'd go through the
Right.
regional piece.
That-
But our region a little bit differently. I'm talking about other regions around the state. I feel that it's much more easy and probably more regularly used as a mutual aid resource, even more than a regional resource. And if we haven't gotten out to some of these areas and really pushed it, I'm not sure if the regional resource would say, hey, we need that AMBUS, if they viewed it even as a viable tool if it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours away.
So let me give you an example. A couple days ago, we had a tour bus head on into a semi. And a small rural county, they have 2 ambulances.
How far away?
They were 63 miles out of El Paso city limits. The county service immediately next to them had no ambulances to help them. So their dispatch is not connected into the El Paso Communications Center for them to send the AMBUS. So I got a call. She explained to me what had happened, and bless her heart, the question was, would this qualify for the AMBUS? And I was like, they're on their way to you right now. It's okay. Yes, absolutely. So I think as we stretch out further into the rural areas and those regions that touch the larger metropolitan areas, we have real opportunity to sort of bring them into how they're going to utilize and activate these processes as a mutual aid.
So I think we're talking and bringing it up about the EMTF assets like the AMBUS to that thing. I think it rips a Band-Aid, kind of pulls a scab off of what the real issue is, which regional regional mutual aid. What does that mean? Everyone knows what local mutual aid means. It means I have a county here and we share some jurisdiction and we regularly back each other up. Everybody agree with that definition? I send him a truck. When he runs out of trucks and he has a shortness of breath call, it's near enough where we've agreed we're buddies, and I make sure I buy him lunch every once in a while just so we stay in good nature, and we try to take care of those guys and they take care of us. It's mutually beneficial, and we've made that work for years. Who understands that system and agrees? Raise your hand. Okay? Well, I got old Mitch, Chief Mitch over there. I don't really like Chief Mitch. I know Chief Rennie likes him, but I don't really like him. In fact, he was a jerk to me in one of the meetings one time. I don't know that I'd even go over there. He's never called me to go to a wreck. Do I have to go to his call? If he has a big call? Do I have to go? No. So I think that that's regional mutual aid. Not your neighbor, but your neighbor's neighbor. Or your neighbor's neighbor's neighbor. Is that going to translate in some cases to a state mission? Absolutely. Sometimes it could. Sure. But not always. We know how to do local mutual aid, and we've put systems in place to work on local mutual aid because it's in our face. We run out of trucks, we run out of assets, or we have things that transiently for 2 hours surge us to a place that we really need each other. But we don't have enough incidents where the next ring, right? So I'm looking at my Houston colleagues. This is sort of what the AMOPS protocol really was trying to address. Is that a fair point? when the regional, right. It was looking at how do we work together functionally and organize that so that Chief Mitch doesn't have to have everybody's individual phone number to his neighbor's neighbor. Why would we do that? Especially if we want to use it once every 2 or 3 years and the number's probably changed. I think Chief Mitch should know Chief Rennie's phone number. Who thinks he should know that dispatch number? That should happen directly between them. Agree. But I think we owe it to ourselves to work through a process to have regional mutual aid capabilities in whatever the way they decide to do it. That could be, in your area, it might be the El Paso Fire Communications Center is the hub for all of those requests. And they have a list of everybody's phone number because there's a central place. I think that makes some sense, but we haven't spent as much time, and I think over the next 2 or 3 years we really need to focus on that. So why am I bringing that up right now? Paris. Paris, ISIS. I think we're at risk. I think we've always been at risk. I think it's clearly present now. We're at risk for some type of incident like that. And it likely, except at the largest jurisdictions, will require, the largest jurisdictions might make it through that with just local mutual aid.
Paris was a local response.
Paris is, how many people? It's the size of New York,
Paris
right?
was a local response until intel and they gathered and they needed more assets before it was federalized.
They would have needed
And then it expanded.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah. So all incidents are a local response.
Correct.
To be
Correct.
fair.
It's a local response until the event itself dictates it's a larger, and the state, because once it expands outside of local, the response becomes sluggish.
Are you talking about in Paris or here?
In general, because as you need
Because of the
more
miles,
assets-
or because of why? Why do you think it becomes sluggish?
It
I'm going to agree
does.
with you, but I'm just curious why you think it does become sluggish.
Because you're having to activate and motivate and get a mission together.
For lots of different
I've been in that
agencies, right? Especially if you have to know all your buddies' phone numbers. Chief Mitch, dispatch center, has to know Chief Eric and Chief Emily's dispatch center, right? Because that's the way regional is. I have to know all those neighbor guys' phone numbers. I don't have just one number to call after I call my buddy. I know so you're actually I agree with you. I think it is slower. You know why it's slower? Number one, there's miles involved. But number two, there's not really a rapid system plan for activation. In most areas of the country, I think getting regional mutual aid would be some level of pain. Who agrees with that? Where would you call? Who would you do? How would you get regional assets? Regional assets. You're making my point for me. I want to make sure that the EMTF programs, along with their local EMS committees and RACs, are working together to build these regional EMTF/mutual aid plans. That's all I'm saying. This is what I'd like to have happen. Something blows up in Chief Mitch's area. He's going to send 5 trucks. He's going to send 3 engines. He's going to send 2 big trucks. He's going to send a battalion chief. He goes, holy cow, there's like 150, 250 people here. We have a small level 4. I'm in a town of 15,000. Dispatch, send me Chief Rennie's guys ASAP, because he has 5 trucks. The rest of his counties they have 1 volunteer truck around him, right? Everybody know this? Everybody can envision this? But he has a sister city. I'll just pick at New Braunfels and San Marcos. So he's going to call this guy and say, hey, send me ASAP. And they go, boop, boop. They hit the tones and are out the door. Anybody disagree so far? Anybody disagree so far? No one. Unanimous agreement. What does he do next? It's different in every part of this state right now. what would you do to get, not him, you know how to get him, how do you get the three of us and the three of them? And we're all within an hour and a half. How do you do that? So you think that should go through the emergency management process?
What's your next?
So he should call his local emergency manager. Everybody, who thinks that's the right way? Who thinks that's the politically right way because Chief's in the back room? So, Joe?
So I think there's actually, you make a good point, and I think the easiest way to describe this is that the agreement that you're talking about for local mutual aid is just that. It's an agreement, right? It's automatic aid.
Don't use that
Almost,
word.
wait, for local mutual aid for my neighbor, the New Braunfels, to use your point, the New Braunfels Fire Chief and the San Marcos Fire Chief have an agreement, and their dispatch centers know when I run out, I call them, and the other dispatch center knows when New Braunfels calls for, they're going to call the next one. That's local mutual aid. What we're talking about with state mutual aid is an agreement. Now, there's a vetting process and acceptance process, and we have to go through that to roster certain resources for the state. What you're talking about in the middle is now this weird, it's the squishy piece to that, and I think what dogs down the system is the approval process. So and it probably is.
You mean at the chief level to the response agency, to me, if I'm going to.
However the message gets to you from Dr. Moriber's jurisdiction, however that happens, I'm going to speak for a bunch of people sitting behind me. They may either throw digits or approve, either this digit or another one, that there is some level of a phone call, right? It's either going to take 1 minute or it's going to take 20 minutes to wake up 4 chiefs and ask, well, what's our current staffing, so on and so forth, to make that happen.
Who agrees with that? Who agrees with what he's saying? Kenneth, you agree? That's what bogs down the regional. I agree.
That's where the streamlining process. That's where regional EMTF.
Yeah.
And it's going to be different in Wanda's region, in San Antonio, and Austin, and Dallas, to an extent. But that's where the agreements are lacking. Is that
question?
Yes.
Why? Why, if the New Braunfels Fire Chief and the San Marcos Fire Chief over coffee and then more formally with probably dispatch protocols have thought through and discussed that if New Braunfels calls, they're going to not call until they really need help. And if I trust Rennie to do that, I'm going to say, you don't need to call the big boss. Go.
So this is basically like.
Hold on, I'm not done. This is important. Why would we not have meetings and plans that say, if you call the organizing spot, whatever that phone number is, and Mitch calls, as the chief of Eric, I'm Chief Eric, I have said, if any agency calls this, that we ask the right questions, we say, hey, I've been a part of this discussion, and you know what? If Kenneth calls this and says, I'm hurting, and Chief Shalon's helped me, right? If Chief Shalon's helping me and I still need help, I have one number to call. I call that number, and this person, this center, is going to call whoever they can. But we have all agreed if that center calls and it's a regional mutual aid job, go. Don't call a battalion chief who then calls an assistant chief who then calls the chief who's making potatoes down there what are we doing? We go on the local mutual aid. Why won't we do that today? Cost, and we don't know what's really on the other end and how bad it is. And am I going to waste a bunch of money and time and guys moving out and call in backfill and what the heck and who is that guy? And I don't even know who that is. Whoa, patch me through to the incident commander before I'll release some ambulances to go. That's lack of trust and lack of a regional mutual aid system. That's what that is. Because when you have a local mutual aid system, you get to trust the guy you send them. Oh, why don't we send them on the state missions? Because we know we're going to get paid, and we've built a system. Oddly, we're more likely to send ambulances to the local guy down the street and send ambulances to Beaumont instantly. Oh, EMTF activation, going to get paid? We're in. Guys, get your gear, get your gear. We're swarm. We owe it to ourselves because of Paris, because of other problems we're going to have, to build out our regional EMTF and mutual aid system. That's what I think. I'm sorry, Micah, go ahead.
I mean, is it, what you're talking about is basically like fire departments in a county, that's right? I mean, if it's this, then you got a different, if it's 3 alarm, then it's this person, then that person, if it's in this city, right? I mean,
yeah.
The same concept, I mean.
And even if we created a threshold that could go without all the approvals, the equivalent of a, primary response or whatever that is for the assets that are within EMTF, and then a phone call, but so that things are rolling out the door. I think. Really? I said even if we came up with a threshold of the assets within the EMTF realm that would go right away, and then, if it turns out you need, 5 levels of that or whatever, then there gets a call. I know in our area, a primary response goes pretty much without question. But if you start asking for lots more, then yes, they have to go through some how bad, how many, that sort of stuff. But I think you're right, Eric. I think we should work on at least some first line. They're gone, and now let's regroup and see what's left and what else they need.
I would just caution and respond with what assets are being requested.
Yeah, say it again to the speaker, sorry.
I would caution in the response, and don't over-respond with assets, only respond with requested local assets, whatever.
Fully
whatever
agree. Fully agree. So the fear is this regional response thing could result in lots of people who weren't even requested going for, basically they were activated.
Correct.
Who agrees with that? You have to agree. We should not send anything that wasn't requested. Fully agree. 110% agree. So one of our challenges is going to be, as we start to talk about the concept, is bringing back bad memories of bad regional responses. I guarantee you, we've been a part of some bad regional responses where someone said, we just need 5 ambulances. We said, send 25. We're the region, we're smart. You go, who said 25 other trucks? I asked for 5. Who's had that happen? Yeah, you go, we don't need regional response. I need local mutual aid response. Buddy, I'm in charge at this scene. I'm going to call you and don't send me anything else, and we don't need regional. Right? It's ridiculous that we sent 25 in the first place, and it's ridiculous that there was somebody somewhere else that was able to launch a bunch of stuff that wasn't directly requested. Why did that probably happen? Somebody who was overzealous, and there wasn't a real plan. There was just this squishy plan. I'm going to use us for an example. I'm going to tell you today, we have a regional MCI plan that basically says if you call your mutual aid partner, that's fine. If you need more trucks, if you need your neighbor's neighbor, you call MedCom, you say, I need a regional MCI alarm. That will get you 5 trucks, an ambulance strike team leader, 1 or 2 ambuses, Dudley? 1 ambus? 2 ambuses moving, and an MCI trailer, which is a small 20-foot trailer with 30 backboards and a multi-layer oxygen, it's seat collars and that stuff. That's what a standard package MCI alarm looks like in our region. We have 6 of those trailers spread out. We have ambulance strike teams in each region. We have the 2 ambuses. That's the way that works. Call one place, you say, I need this other help, and it works. Now, if you go, wait, you know what, I don't need the MCI. Once that's rolling, or you can tailor that and say, I don't need 2 buses, I just need one. In fact, just send me 1 bus. You can, it's a la carte, but if you just pick up the phone and say, I have an MCI, that's the package you get so that that part's moving. They don't even know where it's coming from. Frankly, do you care? I mean, if you called Chief Rennie and Chief Emily and they're coming to help, and I've got 2 buses hit, you know, it's one of those, you hear me talk about it at the high school football game, God forbid a rabbit run out of the first bus, because in our town, they're doing like 80, and they're about 8 feet apart. Boom, 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 and the band, boom, 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 boom. Right?
That's exactly what happened last night near Cameron.
If the first bus trips,
4 buses.
4 buses, and maybe they're not all bleeding to death, but they're all going to need to be caught. I mean, a lot of them are going to have to be collar-boarded and transported, right, to be seen with kids and involved. That's a lot of transports. God forbid it's one of those super buses, one of those double-decker things. That's like 82 people. They're on I-10. So my point to that is, I don't think if I call that phone number and say I need a regional MCI alarm, because I've already got 2 ambulances from this guy, I got 3 ambulances from them, and I have my 3 ambulances, and so we've got what I've got. I don't care if you're sending them or you're sending them or you're sending them. I don't care. At the moment where that's happening, I'm on scene. I don't care. I just need 5 trucks and the 2 ambuses, please. Who agrees? Show of hands. Who cares? Who doesn't care anymore? Like, y'all are done. Y'all seem like everybody's kind of bored with this.
Eric, just to kind of confirm the criticalness of establishing that mutual trust regionally, Belgium, who's now shut down, is 2 hours and 50 minutes from Paris. That would be a regional response in Texas, you know?
Yeah, true. They also have the ability to like activate their national stuff. Their regional response is like federal, right? If you see that, the police went, oh, we're sending the Army. I'm like, wow. Giddy up, man. We get the chairs. Boom. Got them. Okay.
And I would caution with your response, because as in the Paris attacks, those attacks were coordinated, and the actual victims they were looking for is your response.
Good point.
Well, that goes back to 9/11 and the things we've learned from that, and since then, the coordination of our response and how we do that. I think we plan for that a little bit differently here. I hope that we just don't dump all our eggs in one basket real quick.
Eric, as we've developed this, though, I think we need to look at the rural areas, particularly out in West Texas and stuff, where resources and people are few and far between, but there's a lot of people traveling through there. And the response there would have to be different than it would be in Dallas or Fort Worth.
Yeah, we travel 80 miles an hour on our nights.
Yeah.
Yeah, for 3 days to get there.
Yeah, so we will never be able to make up the fact that Texas is a big place. I mean, if you have a wreck in Sanderson, down on the border halfway between, Big Bend and Del Rio, it's just going to be a while. I mean, you know what I mean? It's a big place, and we can't fix the miles. And that's going to take time and effort. And in some ways, the problem may be over by the time we could even get assets to you. That's a limitation that ought to be in the plan. Yes, ma'am. Raise your hand. Come on up or talk loud.
Nobody can see.
I'll repeat it. Oh, we're on TV.
This is a radio face. So, I guess my question is, and this is where on the emergency management side, it gets frustrating, because to me, it doesn't matter what type of asset it is, if it's an EM asset or if it's a public works asset. If my DDC is where I go and it's a regional response, it's a regional response. Just because I call a DDC doesn't mean it's a state situation. And I don't understand why we can't use the same process regardless of which type of asset it is. I obviously have good relationships within my city, and I'm lucky enough to have people that understand the EMTF, and we would leverage those. But if I didn't, and there's a lot of cities that don't, I don't understand the problem with going to the DDC and saying, I need EMTF response, whatever, but it's a regional response. It's not a state deployment. And I think that the line is easy enough to draw, even if you specifically request it that way.
Okay, so your suggestion would be follow your local, so the EMS agency would then activate their EOC or their emergency manager locally. He would contact his district coordinator locally, right? That's a phone call, and say, we need more ambulances. We have a big MCI out on the highway, and we've exhausted our local mutual aid.
Yes,
right?
I mean, and I understand it at different places, like for instance, where we are, you're gonna have something that's a little bit more robust than just normal local mutual aid, and it's gonna go outside of that. But beyond that, yeah, if it gets bigger than that, and I don't know such and such's phone number down here, I don't understand why we can't call the DDC and say,
You can.
This is where we are.
You can.
Yes, I know I can personally, but I get frustrated that we always seem like we have to come up with different.
A new wheel.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
get it.
I think that who believes the district coordinator and the DDC process should be fully integrated and aware of what's going on the regional EMTF plan? Yeah. So, if I had Steve Gladstone or Tony Gross or Mike Miller, who's our state coordinator, and they are fully apprised of the way we activate those regional EMTF assets, and they know every single time by our ReJobs page, every time some of those things are turning, and frankly, they think that's faster and think that's a good idea, you would think that would be okay. They were looped, right, agree? Fully agree. Fully agree. It's squishy because we haven't had those conversations yet. We've been working on all these other issues. I'm telling you, this is squishy. If you think who has a rock solid regional emergency response plan, mutual aid plan, that's wrapped into the emergency management structure and all your EMS agencies? Crickets. Who? Dare? You do? The AMOPS plan is what right? Okay. What did that cost out of the regional catastrophic grant to write that, by the way? I sort of know. 300? It was at least the 3 FTEs, right? Do you remember?
It was done over several years.
It was a 2-year project. I think it was 150 each year to have 2 or 3 full-time planners meeting and working and writing that plan up. So it took them $300,000 with 40-hour time, 2 or 3 FTEs writing that plan to visit and make sure they wrapped all that up so they have a plan. Perfect. Emergency management's wrapped into it, right? Everybody knows about it, right? That's perfect. That's what I'm talking about. That's why I told them I want to steal it. I'm serious. That should be the model for the regional EMTF plans. Copy paste. Well, not copy paste. There's a lot of stuff there. You copy and then go. All right.
It was grant dollars, it's okay.
We have about 7 minutes. I'd like to talk real quickly about an effort that I'd like to talk about Stop the Bleed. This is in the announcements part of this. I have general public comment along with this, but who knows about the Hartford Consensus and the effort that has come out about tourniquet usage at the bystander level and a Stop the Bleed campaign? Okay, they've been talking about this at Trauma Systems. Jory Klein chairs that. We need to be supportive of that. Over this next 2 or 3 days, I think we need to build a coalition of people to do a statewide effort, Stop the Bleed Texas, right? That has the ability to put the trainer materials out there, that we have a coalition of coalitions across the state to do bystander, no different than we have bystander CPR. And everybody has a face mask, well, not a face mask anymore, but when you need to have a tourniquet, right? We need to have people who are school teachers. We have one of our school districts who's already taught 85% of every school teacher in their building and has a tourniquet in their purse or on their person.
We should at least make sure we have a tourniquet by every AED.
Every AED ought to also have a tourniquet. Who thinks that's a good idea? Agree. So when people die of a tib-fib arterial bleed after it was blown off, shame on us. Shame on us as trauma and emergency health care professionals, experts, for not finding a way to teach somebody. If we taught them CPR across the country, we can teach them how to stop that bleed. Okay, you will hear more about this throughout the RAC chairs meeting, trauma systems meeting. Certainly Dr. Eastridge, our chair, who's a retired colonel and has had 6+ deployments, is a military surgeon, now is a trauma surgeon at University Hospital. I know Dr. Alex Eastman, trauma surgeon and medical director from Parkland, Jory, et cetera. I'd like to see us coalescing around a giant effort to do Stop the Bleed Texas, and I'll appreciate all of your support about that. In fact, if we could does anybody have any questions about that? Any concerns? Okay, so I'm going to make a motion. You're welcome to friendly amend this, because I don't know if I'm going to say. I'd like for the GTAC Disaster Committee to support the development through a coalition of coalitions effort for a Stop the Bleed Texas campaign to teach bystander tourniquet application and bleed stopping. Huh? Yes. Whatever that group looks like and finds and coalesces, that we are completely supportive of that effort.
I second.
All right, that was pretty terribly said, so I think you guys know what we'll mean. We'll clean it up to make it look right. All right, any other general, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Does anybody else have any announcements? Any concerns, any questions? Yes, sir. Did you raise your hand? No. On the front row. Did you raise your hand? No. You were just waving a okay. I have 2 minutes and 13 seconds on my little screen here. If we need to move the clock back, we can move the clock back.
Got one here.
Yeah, Brad.
Just a quick 15-second comment. Anybody that's been around a while and 10, 15 years can remember back to the days when we would have GTAC meetings and year after year, 2, 3, 4 years, be talking about the same thing over and over. These last 6, 7 years have been an extreme honor for me to sit at this table and work with everybody in this room. You look at the work and the product that this group in this room has turned out is amazing. You've heard me say it before, but all I'm going to leave you with is I encourage everybody to keep up your efforts to educate everybody down to that smallest volunteer department in West Texas that knows what's going on, that knows these resources are there and how to get a hold of them, and let's make this beneficial for everybody across the state.
Here, here. Well, thank you, Brad. We're done.
Wait.
Oh,
Just
we're not done.
A reminder to everybody, has everybody heard about DSHS's Ebola and high consequence infectious disease conferences that are going to be going on over the next few months? Okay. If you're not aware of it, get with your local public health folks. I think that they're going to be very good conferences. They spent a lot of time putting this thing together. They're going to include national and state experts and include, in most areas, your regional response experts as well. So just would encourage everybody to try and make those conferences.
Thank you, guys.
Got 42 seconds.
I know. I got 42 seconds.